Hello, I'm Stephen Czekalski, and for my art appreciation presentation, I am doing the art movement known as Futurism. So, the big question here is what exactly is Futurism? And in a nutshell, Futurism was both an artistic movement and a social movement. And the doctrine of Futurism was that anything that represented tradition or the past was bad and should be destroyed. So, futurists believed that museums, libraries, academies, they all represented part of the past and therefore should be destroyed and replaced by new institutions which represent the future and modern times. So, because of this, a major theme in Futurism artwork is anything that represented industry or the modern world, such as airplanes, cars, speed, violence, and generally anything that related to industry. Futurism first popped up in Italy during the 20th century, and the creator behind it was a man named Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, who was an Italian poet, and he wrote a manifesto called the Manifesto of Futurism. And throughout the whole movement, Marinetti was a major figure, and he was the main pushing force behind the movement. And so, after he wrote this manifesto, several painters, um, Umberto Bicconi, Luigi Russolo, and Carlo Carri, uh, they all really liked what he said, agreed with him, and they published their own pamphlets, which made it into many newspapers, and the idea spread very quickly. And the amount of publicity it got really helped the movement go into other areas besides painting and writing, and it made it into the music uh, industry, the film industry, and into architecture. As art movements go, Futurism was a very short art movement. It really only lasted from the early days of the 20th century up to about the end of World War II. Uh, and this is because the main driving force behind the movement was Marinetti, and he tried to get the movement to persist by he tried to get it made the state art movement of Italy, and uh, he couldn't really get anything done. And so when he died in the early 1940s, the movement kind of lost its momentum, and just everybody stopped making art, futurist art, and it slowly disappeared. So here I have a very brief list of some major contributors to the futurist movement. The first is Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, who was a Italian poet, and he was also the founder. And his most notable contribution was writing the Futurist Manifesto, which was uh, the kind of started the movement off. And there were several painters, most notably probably Umberto Bocconi, Carlo Cara, and Gino Cervini. They all made some very well known and very beautiful futurist paintings. Uh, and then, in terms of futurist architecture, Antonio Santelli made several um, architectural designs around the ideas and principles of futurism, which also were very beautiful. As I said, the ideas and doctrine of futurism because it was so pervasive throughout the Italian society, it leaked into all sorts of different art forms. And architecture was not excluded from this. So here is an example of probably one of the more notable futurist architects' work, and it is a architect concept design called House with External Elevators. And for being made in 1914, this clearly looks very futuristic compared to what was back then. You have very rigid edges, slopes, curves. The idea of elevators, I'm not sure if they were too common back in the early 1900s. So this is just one example of futurist architecture, which is kind of speaks for itself. It's very interesting. Here we have a painting by Giacomo Balla, who was a influential futurist painter. And this painting is called Abstract Speed Plus Sound. And as I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint, the idea of speed was very important to the Futurism movement. It was kind of speed is violent, it's quick, it's very modern. Planes go fast, cars go fast. It was kind of along that idea. And within the painting, you can see these long curved strokes, which it really makes the painting just feel like hectic, very fast, kind of violent. And this is exactly what the Futurism movement was all about. And so I felt this was a very, very good illustration of the Futurism movement in terms of painting. The final futurist artwork I'm going to be covering in this presentation is a sculpture by the name of Unique Forms of Continuity in Space by Umberto Bocconi. And much like all the other works within the futurist art movement, this sculpture features the feeling of speed. It has swirls of metal that go up towards the top, and that gives it a very violent feel. And as sculptures go, it's quite different from what you'd be expecting from 1913. It's looks like a odd, almost robot-like human, and I thought it was a good representation of sculptures in the futurist art movement.